Imagine World War II, the front lines, thousands of soldiers, miles of tanks, endless artillery. Now, what if I told you that a significant portion of this immense military might was a complete illusion, a ghost? Today, we're re-diving into one of the most brilliant and bizarre deceptions in military history, the story of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. This wasn't your typical fighting force. Their ranks were filled not with hardened soldiers, but with artists, architects, sound engineers, and advertising professionals. Their weapons weren't rifles and grenades. They were inflatable tanks, powerful speakers, and pure, unadulterated creativity. Their mission? To fool Hitler's entire army, and they did it with the flair of a Broadway production. So, how did a handful of artists armed with rubber and recordings manage to save thousands of lives and influence the outcome of the war? Let's pull back the curtain on this top-secret unit. The year is 1944. The Allies are pushing across Europe after the D-Day landings. Every move is critical, every soldier precious. But Allied command faced a huge problem: how to confuse the German army about their real plans. How to make them think a massive force was gathering in one place, when the real attack was planned for somewhere else entirely. Enter the Ghost Army, officially activated in January 1944 at Camp Forest, Tennessee. This unit of just over 1,100 men was a masterclass in misdirection. They were divided into several components, each specializing in a different kind of trickery. First, you had the visual deception, handled by the 603rd Camouflage Engineers. These guys were the set designers of this elaborate play. They could roll into an empty field in the dead of night and, by morning, make it look like an entire armored division had set up camp. Their secret weapon: inflatable tanks, cannons, jeeps, and trucks. Think about it. From a German reconnaissance plane flying miles overhead, a perfectly painted, life-sized inflatable M4 Sherman tank looked identical to a real 32-ton beast of steel. These rubber decoys were incredibly effective. They were light enough that just 4 men could pick one up and move it, creating the illusion of a convoy on the move. They even made fake tire tracks with special rollers to complete the picture. One veteran famously said, "Our job was to be seen, not to fight." They'd deliberately create a messy, uncamouflaged camp to make sure German spies and pilots would spot them. But sight is only one sense. What about sound? An army is loud. The constant rumble of engines, the clatter of tank treads, the chatter of soldiers. A silent armored division is a dead giveaway. This is where the 3132nd Signal Service Company Special came in. These were the sound effects wizards. They traveled with massive speakers mounted on trucks, capable of blasting audio that could be heard up to 15 miles away. Their recordings were state-of-the-art for the time, captured at Fort Knox on wire recorders. They had a whole library of sounds: tank divisions moving in, pontoon bridges being built, soldiers marching and digging trenches. They would drive to a location under the cover of darkness, set up their speakers, and play these sonic deceptions all night long. A German listening post would pick up the noise and report a huge Allied force massing for an attack. By dawn, the sound trucks would be gone, leaving the enemy to waste resources, preparing for an assault that would never come. They were, quite literally, fighting a war with sound. Then there was the radio deception, the spoof radio network. This part of the unit mimicked the radio traffic of a real command. They learned the distinct Morse code, FIST, the unique sending style of operators from actual units. They would then impersonate those operators, sending out fake messages to create the impression that a headquarters and its battalions were operating in a certain area. The Germans, who were experts at radio intelligence, would intercept these signals and completely misread the Allied battle plan. And finally, to sell the whole lie, they used what they called special effects or atmosphere. This was pure theater. A few soldiers would drive into a local town in a single jeep, but they'd be wearing the divisional patches of the unit they were impersonating. They'd go to the local cafes and bars, talking loudly about their upcoming attack. They knew German spies and sympathizers were everywhere, and they intentionally fed them false information. One soldier might pose as a colonel and drive around in a staff car, making sure he was seen by the locals. It was all about creating a believable story. From May 1944 until the end of the war, the Ghost Army conducted more than 20 battlefield deceptions, from the fields of Normandy to the banks of the Rhine River. Their most famous operation was codenamed Operation Viraison. In March 1945, the U.S. Ninth Army was preparing to cross the Rhine River, a formidable natural barrier and one of the last major German defense lines. The real crossing was planned for a specific, heavily fortified location. The Ghost Army's job was to draw German attention and their firepower 10 miles away. Over several days, the 1,100 men of the Ghost Army pretended to be 2 full divisions, a force of about 30,000. They deployed their entire arsenal of tricks. Inflatable tanks lined the riverbank. At night, the sound trucks blasted the sounds of bridge construction and armored columns moving into position. Spoof radio filled the airwaves with chatter. Small patrols made their presence known. The deception was so convincing that the German command diverted significant forces, including artillery and panzer divisions, to counter the phantom invasion. They shelled the empty fields where the inflatable tanks sat, wasting precious ammunition on rubber and air. While the Germans were focused on the Ghost Force, the real Ninth Army crossed the Rhine with far fewer casualties than anticipated. It's estimated that the Ghost Army's performance saved thousands of Allied lives during this single operation. The incredible thing is, their story was classified for over 40 years after the war. These men went home, became famous artists like Bill Blass and Ellsworth Kelly, and never spoke a word about their clandestine operations. They were sworn to secrecy. Their families and friends had no idea that they had been part of one of the most creative and impactful special units in history. The official records were only declassified in 1996. The legacy of the Ghost Army is a powerful testament to the idea that creativity and ingenuity can be weapons just as powerful as bombs and bullets. They didn't win the war by overpowering the enemy, but by outthinking them. They used art, sound, and theater to manipulate the battlefield, turning the enemy's own intelligence against them. Their story reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in brute force, but in the power of a well-told lie. It's a Hollywood movie that actually happened, a secret kept for decades, and a brilliant chapter in the history of warfare. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the incredible story of the Ghost Army. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. And let me know in the comments what other incredible lesser-known stories from history you'd like to see covered. See you in the next video.